Welcome to the Software Lifecycle Stories podcast. We bring you stories of what worked and sometimes what did not in the course of discovering, designing, developing, delivering, and using software based solutions, as shared by practitioners who went through these situations.
Swetha Sivaram is a senior engineering manager at IBM India. She has over 17 years of experience in the software industry, spanning the domains of telecom, application development, and most recently, systems engineering. She has led various engineering teams, and with her expertise in transformation management, agile development, and goal-oriented execution skills, has helped teams challenge status quo and achieve their potential. Swetha is passionate about helping women in tech careers achieve their full potential and is actively involved in several efforts, both within IBM as well as externally. Swetha has a bachelor's degree in computer engineering from BITS Pilani and, among other things, enjoys solving large puzzles. So, welcome, Swetha. Thank you so much for joining us in our podcast channel. It's been a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for asking, Chitra. It's a pleasure to be here.
How about we start our conversation today, Swetha, with you telling our audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So, Chitra, I'm a senior engineering manager currently at IBM. I have over 17 years of experience in the software industry, and I started off as as an individual contributor, as an engineer in the telecom domain. Right. My initial few years were all in the telecom domain. I worked with many different companies, both operators as well as people setting up their own network, as well as vendors of telecom software. And then at some point, I moved into application development as a domain. I spent a few years there and then moved into systems engineering. And my current role is very much at the heart of systems engineering. We take care of enterprise server performance in the team that I'm doing currently. So a very hardcore tech job at this point in time. I've been fortunate to have a very diverse experience. When I say diverse, very different cultures. I've worked in very many different places in many different countries. I've been part of very diverse teams as well. I've had the opportunity to work with folks across the globe, folks across India within the teams here in India. And that's also taught me a lot. In terms of what I specialize in my management role here is primarily around transformation management. I would say goal-oriented execution skills would be another strength of mine. And leading teams with agile development skills is the other aspect that I would say I'm comfortable with, right? Overall, it's been a very interesting journey in the tech field for me over all these years. I would say, yeah, that's about me.
Okay, thank you, Swetha. Seems like we're going to have a rich conversation, and I definitely see this, spreading across several episodes, perhaps. So, what was your inspiration, or what was your motivation to choose computer science as a discipline?
Okay, so from as far as I can remember, right, I think my first exposure to computers was really video games, right? I don't know if you remember those early video games where you would have, the Marios and the Lord Runners and all of those different, I think the initial games that came out. So that was my first experience with computers or something akin to computers, right? And what's interesting is I actually started computer science as a subject in school when I was in my 5th grade. And we were introduced to flowcharts at that time. I still remember we did a lot of basic programming then. And somehow just getting an answer on the screen and understanding that I was able to apply some sort of logic and get an answer and an output was very satisfying, I would say. And then it's the usual, I would say, when I grew up, 12th grade, there was no other choice in terms of, I was never thinking of medicine as a career because I was good at math, good at science. The obvious choice was to then do something in engineering. But even then, I didn't consider anything except computer engineering because I was still fascinated at that point with the games I played. And I always wanted to make a game, although I'm very far from it right now. But yeah, that's the story of how I got into engineering.
Okay. I do hope someday you get to code that game. So, what were your early days as an engineer like? Whether it was the telecom domain and later on in the app and systems engineering space. Can you share some of your learnings and experiences from these days?
Yeah, so, I'm glad you asked about that. And this is something that I have shared in some other sessions as well, right? I think my early days of the career, when I look back at them now, I think those have probably been the ones where I learned the most. And the reason I say that is I learned things the hard way around. When I was out of college, I was a very social extrovert person, right? And I brought that along to work with me a lot. And what that also meant was that I would be very interested in doing a lot of what you would call extracurricular activities, even while at work, right? Planning things, planning on how to go out for a picnic or something of that sort. While I was good at my work, I started getting perceived as this person who was interested in doing team building activities. And, when I speak to young women engineers today, I make it a point, I bring up this one topic because I feel perceptions are built on, the activities that you generally tend to go for or things that you lead. And while I realize it's good to have all of that, I wish also that I had been more proactive in some of the other official related activities, right? I mean, working on projects that were more serious, stretching myself on aspects that would have challenged me more technically rather than spending time on these extracurricular activities. So I think that was probably the first lesson I learned, how perceptions get built and how you need to portray yourself for your strengths. And while you like doing a lot of different things, in the corporate environment, in an official capacity, it's always good to stick to what is deemed more official to bring out your technical expertise as well.
That's a very, very interesting way to, start your journey and very insightful lesson learned. Thanks for sharing that. How has your experience been transitioning, from a telecom domain to an application development domain and now into systems engineering? It almost seems like a reversal of sorts, and it feels like you're a full stack person now.
So, the initial change from when I went from telecom to application development was not one of choice, right? When I say that, so what had happened was we had, when my parents moved out of India, I decided to join them. And, in my career in India at that point in time, I primarily worked with telecom companies. And when we moved out of India, I was in this place called Jordan, which is in the Middle East. And this wasn't a very software development friendly market. It was more of a sales market. Most engineers would end up doing a sales job in that market, right? Because that's what was running the economy there at that time. And so while I did work with some of the telecom operators at that point, I was working with one of the leading wireless operators. After a while, doing a field support job, which would require me to go into work at all times of day because we'd had to bring the network down at, let's say, midnight or 1:00 when the traffic was least on the network. After a while, it took its toll. And so I decided I'd stick to a a traditional office job, and I started looking out for something different, right? And when I found this opening at a startup where they were looking for someone to develop an application, I jumped at that, right? So, like I said, the first was more wanting to leave the field support rather than leave the telecom domain itself. But the second part, I think, when I moved back to systems engineering from application development, I think application development, I learned a lot of different things. And the reason I say that is, even today in the Indian market, I think software products tend to be much more owned end to end by teams in India, especially in corporates, rather than hardware products, right? Hardware still largely gets done out of India for whatever reasons. So the application development experience working on the application domain really brought in that perspective for me of end-to-end development. I started understanding what it takes to create something, from the requirements gathering step right up until you deploy, and then work with customers on making them successful, and then take their feedback, and then, the entire loop of putting that back into the product. I think that was very enriching. But having done that, the next step for me logically was also to understand, when these applications are running, what exactly are they running on, right? And when I found this opportunity to actually come back and work on core technologies, and when I joined this team initially, I actually told them, this is as close as you can come to what you learn in computer engineering, right? Your advanced computer organization, compiler, development, and all of that. I think this is where all of that really comes together. And the fact that I am now in a space where I can relate to what I've learned really makes me happy, because a lot of times, you see, we do a lot in engineering, which we really don't use much later on, right? At the most, you'd probably work on data structures and some operating system concepts, but a large part of what we do as part of engineering gets lost out. So, this has been very enriching over the last few years, working on the systems domain, finally putting to use what I had spent 4 years doing in college.
Wow, that's some experience out there. So in terms of, you had mentioned earlier that, you have a lot of diverse experience, especially working with different countries and cultures. Can you share some of those, experiences? And what is it that you learned from, working with this kind of diversity?
Right. So I think there are three major things that I can think of, right? Three very different cultures that I've had the chance to work with over significantly extended periods of time, right? And the first I think I'll start off with is, as we were graduating, we had the 6-month internship that we had to do as part of our engineering course, right? And I had the opportunity to go to Europe and work for 6 months at one of the business schools, actually putting together an executive development program for them. So we had to put up this entire portal where executives would come for short-term courses, and we had to create this environment where they could freely interact with the other executives who were on that course, look at course material, do all of that, right? So this was a 6-month project that I was involved in. And the one thing that really stood out for me, and that was my first experience moving out of India, looking at the seriousness with which people came into work every morning, right? The one thing I noticed is it was no nonsense when you were in the office, right? Whether it was 8 to 4 or 8 to 5 or 9 to 5, whatever the work timings were, the one thing that I really learned from that experience is to give it your all when you're at work. Sometimes what I've noticed in my experiences after that is, here in India, and maybe I shouldn't generalize this, but I've seen we tend to take things a little more relaxed at the office. Our office really doesn't start and stop at a particular time. Sometimes it just keeps dragging on and on. I think the work ethic that I saw and I learned when I was during that time in Europe, I thought that was something that I will carry along for the rest of my life, right? Do your work, get it done, whatever it is, concentrate and focus and get things moving. And once you're back home, then, be at home. But then I understand that it's not always possible to completely cut yourself off. But the first thing there is work ethic, right? My second experience would be when I was in Jordan, right? And there, I think the thing that I learned the most is how you can be successful while being independent. And what I mean by that is, okay, so like I said, I wanted to move out of that telecom job that I had because of the odd hours. And then I got this job with a startup that was trying to build an application. And this was basically a company that was owned by a couple of brothers. The two of them, they opened this company. They hired me on as a software developer. And in addition to the three of us in the office, there was one sales executive who was going to help market the product I was going to make. And that was the organization, the four of us, right? The only person who knew anything about software in that organization was me. The only person who knew about anything about sales was the sales executive, right? So we were all on our own. Right from putting up this entire architecture of the product on your own, and then figuring out the flaws in that, and then re-architecting, and then implementing it, understanding what's going wrong, debugging, and we had 3 versions of this product that I was building. There was the desktop version, there was an online version, and then there was a client server version when you were not on an intranet and not on the internet, right? And I would get calls saying, this particular case works, but something else doesn't work, and trying to debug those activities and ensure that the customers were able to use that product efficiently with least trouble, and then taking their feedback and then putting it all back in was a huge experience for me. It single-handedly gave me a lot of confidence at the end of it to say, yes, I can achieve what I set my mind out to do. And I think the best thing for me in that experience is at the end of one of these customer interactions that I had, the lady who was using this tool day in and day out to do, this was a psychometric evaluation software, by the way. So the lady who was using it day in and day out to evaluate the people coming in for interviews, she basically said, I've never used any other software that's so simple to use. And that really made my day and maybe the next year as well, right? So I think that's one thing I learned in my second experience, right, in the Middle East, that you can be independent and still be extremely successful. You can stand on your own and feel good about what you've achieved. The third experience is fairly recently, and I had this chance to be in China for 4 weeks. I was working on, I actually had gone as part of a CSR initiative, and we were working with this NGO, right? The one thing that really stood out for me when I was there is, as a country, how this entire, all the people there were so single-mindedly focused on, becoming better and achieving the next big technological breakthrough or the next big thing, right? And despite all of those technological advances, I saw a lot of humanity in the people there, right? So we would be walking on the road, and this was a very multicultural team that I was part of for those 4 weeks. We'd be walking on the road, getting to the office or getting back to our hotel, and you would find very often people stopping by and speaking to the project assistants who were Chinese and asking them, who are these folks? Where are they from? And, just getting to know people. And when I think about it today, I don't think we have that sort of an attitude left in the cities here anymore, right? The humanity of it all, I think, despite being so technologically advanced, was something that really stood out for me during my interactions in China. So very different experiences, as I said, but very enriching at the same time. Gets you to understand a lot more about how things work.
Thanks, Swetha. This is a really people-centric perspective that I've perhaps heard, for the first time in some of the conversations that I've been having with people about their journeys as, in the software world as we know it. So these are really interesting.
That's something that's very rare these days, right? I mean, when we are targeting technology or advancement or betterment of our own career, I think somewhere deep inside we've lost that, like you said, the people-centric part of it. And looks like the Chinese really haven't yet.
Well, that's a really interesting perspective. So I know you to be a very passionate technologist. I've heard you talk several times at conferences. What is it about technology that fascinates you? What is it that you see in terms of technology in the future?
I think in general, right, whether it's technology, whether it's engineering, whether it's science, I think the one thing that really fascinates me is that there's always a solution to any problem that you have. If there is an issue, you can go work out a way to fix it, or something that you can do better. And that has probably always held my interest, right? If it doesn't work in one way, it will work in another way. It's just a matter of figuring that way out. And I tell my team this multiple times as well, right? There may be 1 million ways why something might fail, but we are in technology and we need to find the one way that things will work. And that's all we care about, right? So I think that's fascinated me, and that's what still keeps me going at this point. And just repeat the second question for me again, please.
Yeah, so what is it that you see about technology and our future?
So let me share a very interesting anecdote on that, right? Where do you see technology in the future? Very much to do with all the advances happening on AI and so on, right? So I regularly watch some series before I wind up for the day on Netflix, right? And the other day, as I was browsing through my list on Netflix, there was a new category that came up, and it said, since you've watched certain other series, here are some more woman-dominated series, okay? And for an instant, I never realized that I was drawn towards woman-dominated series. But then I said, okay, maybe this is something that they're showing everyone. And then I asked my husband to turn on his profile to see if he's seeing something similar. And he wasn't, right? So I was really amazed that just by seeing my viewing patterns, there was the software now that could predict what I would like next, right? And I think that's very enlightening. Of course, sometimes it can also get a little creepy, but I think just the fact that sometimes we are so oblivious to how we behave or how we react or how we are tuned, and now we have this something that can actually help us understand ourselves better. I think there's a lot of potential in that. Just just getting humans to understand the reason why they're doing something, or what is it that they're doing that is usually a blind spot to themselves, can really help us become better humans at the end of the day. And that's what I think will be the future of technology.
Using artificial intelligence as a means of introspection.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
And make ourselves better at that.
Interesting to see how that will pan out.
Yeah.
Yeah, moving on to what you have experienced or done in terms of transformation management and agile development. What is it in your area of work that you do as part of transformation management?
So let me take a very simple example, right? I think when we talk about transformation management, a lot of it has to do with just ensuring that you are aligned to the right things that need to get done. So we work in a very global organization, and by virtue of that fact, what happens is that teams are spread geographically across 4 or 5 different sites, and then as a team evolves over several years, you find that there are fragmented missions that are part of something happening in one time zone, part of the same thing happening in another time zone, and so on, right? And one of the things that brings in, although there is work happening 24/7, is that the communication aspects of it become very difficult, right? Become not so well established, if you might call it that. And I think one of the things that we did very early on is pick up this concept of scaled agile. And we tried to implement it in our teams, where we tried to co-locate specific areas and ensure that they were getting done in one place, right? Now, what that also meant is some of these pieces, we did not have really all the skills that were needed to bring that entire team together in one place. And helping the team challenge that status quo, letting go of their comfort zones, challenging them to pick up areas that they were not familiar with and develop expertise in that. And at the same time, helping them make mistakes, fall down, pick themselves up again, and then make themselves successes, right? I think all of that put together is what I would call transformation management. And sticking with the team, giving them the time, and giving them the confidence that they would be able to get past it and get through it and emerge at the other side. I think that entire journey is something that I would say was very rewarding as part of the exercise that we did. So yeah, on the transformation management, I would say it's all about looking at how things can become better. And while people might be very comfortable in the way things are now, helping them move towards an area where things can be even better, and helping them see the light of the day at the end of it.
Thank you, Swetha, for sharing these experiences. I'm sure many of our listeners will resonate with them. I'd like to now segue into a slightly different topic. As a woman in tech, how have you managed to balance the requirements of home and the workplace, and being somebody who is interested in so many things? How have you managed to channelize your own personal development as well as your career development?
I would say about three different things, right? One is definitely the work ethic that I spoke about, that I learned very early on in my career. Ensure that you make the most of your day at the office. Get whatever you need to done at the office when you are here, especially things like interacting with people. If you need to get your team together and discuss something, make sure that you use every minute that you are in the office. I would say that's the first one. The second one is enrolling help whenever I need, right? And I've basically misused that as much as I can, in terms of when I need help, I'll ask for it. I'll ask my spouse, I will ask my parents, I will ask my house help to do things that I may not be able to do just because I have something to take care of at work, right? And ensure that they understand why you're not able to do it. And the fact that you are being upfront about something, and taking on the load when you have to take it on, but then there are days when you can't and you ask for help, people are willing to do that. So I would say that's the second thing. The third one is really don't try to be a perfectionist, is what I would say. I think the initial few years when I was trying to do this, I was beating myself up constantly, if something was not right, either at work or at home, if things were not in the right place. And I probably do that still sometimes. I can think of an instance even this morning, but I try and let it go as much as possible now. Things have a way of falling in place, I think. The more you try to, put something in order, the more chaotic it becomes. So let things just be is probably my third biggest mantra that's helped me so far.
A little more of go with the flow, perhaps, rather than trying to intervene and interject with everything that comes your way.
Absolutely. And I think, that's very much true, especially when you have young kids in the house. They have a way of teaching you that, in not so subtle ways.
Yeah, they really know how to respond in the moment and then let it go thereafter. So for aspiring women in tech, especially those, finishing up college and planning to enter the workforce and be software engineers or developers, what is some advice that you would share with them?
I think my biggest advice to them would be brave. Take the shot. It doesn't matter what the outcome is, right? At least give it a try, give it a good, honest try, and then figure out what you've learned from that attempt, become better, and take the next shot. Um, just be brave. I think a lot of times we don't put up our hands, we don't take an opportunity because we are unsure of what the future holds, right? What am I going to do if this doesn't turn out well? How am I going to manage A versus B? I'm already doing three different things. How am I going to pick up a fourth different thing? I would say it's okay. The very fact that you've got into the industry, you've got past with an engineering or a STEM career in hand, itself proves that you are willing to take the risk and do something that not everyone is capable of doing, or not everyone has the opportunity to do. So give it your best shot, be brave, and you will end up with flying colors ultimately.
Thank you, Swetha. Thanks for sharing that. I have one last question for you, I think. You shared sometime that you enjoy solving large puzzles. What is it about puzzles that fascinates you?
I think, that one is more about building patience more than anything else. So I do all sorts of puzzles. I think the latest one I have is something my husband got me. It's a Ravensburger puzzle. It's a Star Wars puzzle, and it's a 5 feet by 4 feet puzzle. So I've literally taken the mattress off one of the carts and put it on the cart, and I'm trying to solve it. And it takes a while, right? And you really need to be in a zone where you're uninterrupted and you can actually just sit down with this. It's just the puzzle pieces and you. And when you have 5,000 of them, it's very easy to get lost. But bringing some order to that chaos and then finishing parts of it and seeing every small part evolve, I think the satisfaction of doing that, but also the patience that you develop while doing that is something that's immensely rewarding. So yeah, puzzles any day. I will, I will always fall for one of them if they have to be solved.
Maybe this is the way that you're going to build your game, that game that you wanted to build early on in life.
Oh yeah, that's a nice way of thinking about
that. Yeah. Thanks, Swetha. Thanks a lot. This was a very, very nice conversation. I think several things that I learned about you. And I hope our listeners will enjoy this conversation. So thank you for your time.
Chitra, thank you so much for having me on this. It's been a very enjoyable experience. I think I really enjoyed talking about various things that have helped me and sharing that with the audience. So thank you again.
Thank you, Swetha.
If you like the show and would like to share your experiences with the community or know someone else who might want to do that, please get in touch with us at podcast@pm-powerconsulting.com. That is podcast@pm-powerconsulting.com.
Please rate the show on Podchaser, Stitcher, iTunes, or any other podcast client that you find us on. Please also share our episodes with your friends and others in your network. If you or anyone you know would like to be featured on our show, do write to us at this email address: podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.